Well, hi there. Hello, and welcome back to the Pitch Grid. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the podcast that brings you news, insight, and analysis from both sides of the football world, the NFL, or American football, and the EFL Championship, which is the second tier of English football. So without further ado, let's head grid side and talk NFL. Brock Purdy just secured his bag, a 5-year, $265 million deal, 181 million guaranteed. 165 of that lands in the first 3 years of his contract, which is incredible. This contract adds up to about a $53 million a year salary, so that makes him the seventh highest paid quarterback in the league based on per annual salary. That is insane to think about. Like, this guy goes from Mr. Irrelevant, right? He goes from being the last pick in the draft. And I remember his first start, I believe it was against the Cardinals, where I did not know what to expect, but he actually played really well. And I was very impressed when I watched it. And now he's gone to two NFC championship games, one of which he tore his labrum in against the Eagles, where they lost to the Chiefs. And then went to play the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, but lost in that one last year. So now he gets his contract, and one could argue that is he elite or is he just surrounded by a lot of talent? Because look at the stars he's got next to him. He's got Christian McCaffrey, he's got George Kittle, he's got Brandon Ayuk, he's got Fred Warner, who we're going to talk about in a minute, he's got all these players around him. Trent Williams, he is surrounded by so much talent. However, I think you also have to take into account that he is the guy getting his other players the ball. He's throwing the passes to Ayuk and to Kittle and to McCaffrey. He's the one making sure that he's the field general for the Niners offense. Last year, they were not so good. Granted, they had a ton of injuries, and some would say that that makes the case for them right there, that they need to see a lot more out of him in those kinds of seasons than in just the seasons where everyone's healthy, everyone's looking good, and the team is rolling on both sides of the ball. However, I do think that you have to think about this. If you say that he doesn't deserve it, I think you take away from his talent. You diminish the accomplishments that he has had and the grind that he's taken to get to this point in the league. Are the diminishing accomplishments, though? Because that 49ers team is stacked with talent. He's been surrounded, and it's been a lot of good free agent signings by John Lynch and company, as well as a lot of good drafting. However, now you're going to see what it looks like when they don't have a ton of talent. And Brock Purdy's going to be now front and center of that because he gets this huge contract. And one could argue that market value plays a role into this kind of argument because market value is, as we've talked about before, just gone up and up and up for the quarterback in this league. We've gone from Patrick Mahomes having, I think, was what, 35 million just a few years ago, to now we're over 50 million. Granted, this is not the highest salary. Again, this is only the seventh highest based on per annum. However, seeing him at the top of these lists, is he really worth it based on talent? And so the discourse comes up again. Is it based on talent, or should we pay him based on market value? And obviously, right now, the league is paying based on market value because that is just how the market works currently. We've seen before Purdy, there was Dak, and then Herbert before him, and Tua, and Burrow, and the list goes on, where each quarterback has raised the benchmark for that. And of course, you could easily say that this is very inflamed by the Deshaun Watson contract, which had a ton of guaranteed money, was a huge contract, and I think that really did boost the market value for quarterbacks. And I think that is pretty unfortunate. However, that's just now because of that contract the way it is. I mean, do you pay Brock Purdy based on his value? What does that look like? What does paying him based on him getting to two NFC championship games and a Super Bowl look like? Should him being on a team full of great players discount his value? In a sense, I don't think so. We have this discussion with Patrick Mahomes a lot, right? Just for an example. He had Tyreek Hill, he's had Travis Kelsey, he's had all these great players like Joe Tooney, he's had so many talented receivers like Sammy Watkins, and he's had an incredible defense also to back him up, and a great coach in Andy Reid also. Very similarly, Brock Purdy has all the great players we've listed. He has Kyle Shanahan, one of the great coaches in the league. Also, I would say that this is a very similar story to Brady when he was a very low draft pick. When he came into the league, no one really knew what he was going to be like, and neither did people with Purdy. Purdy has a lot of the same characteristics as Brady. He's a field general. He's very accurate. He doesn't take a lot of chances. He can scramble, but he isn't like the strongest, most physical runner. He'll get a few yards when he needs to, though, and that's what's key. So there's a lot of similarities. I think if he can take the next step, there's a great chance. But then the question is, can he take that next step? And there's a lot of pressure now on him to do so because now he has this 5-year window to win a Super Bowl. We see this with the Niners because now they've really got these expectations on him. We've seen this with Jalen Hurts as well, where he didn't win a Super Bowl against the Chiefs. Now he's won a Super Bowl, and everyone pretty much consensus thinks that Hurts is top 10, maybe even top 5, depending on who you ask. So Purdy definitely needs to prove now that he has this contract that he is worth that money, and he has the ability to. He has the confidence in him from his team. Now the question is, can he go out and prove it on the field? And I think he has to win a Super Bowl, or you're going to start questioning whether or not he actually is worth that money. Speaking of other Niners that got paid, Fred Warner also got paid this past week. He got a 3-year, $63 million deal with over $56 million guaranteed. He's now the highest paid linebacker in the league. Again, this is the second time, by the way, Fred Warner has become the highest paid linebacker in the league. He got displaced briefly, I believe, by the likes of Nick Bolton and a couple of others, but now Fred Warner's right back at the top of that list, and very deservedly so. The BYU standout is the heartbeat of that defense in San Francisco. He's a very smart, physical, and consistent linebacker, very instinctive, knows where to be. He calls the signals for that defense. And now, with a lot of players leaving on that defense, such as Hufanga and Greenlaw, who have been huge parts of how that defense has been so good for so long, now he's going to be the old cat with a bunch of young guys on that defense who are looking to prove themselves with Robert Saleh coming back into the fold as the defensive coordinator. This is just going to be very interesting. I think he totally deserves the contract Warner does. I think now he has a very new task. He's probably going to be a captain once again. He has the new task now of making sure the Niners keep the standard of defense they've had for so long, and especially with Robert Saleh coming back now. Is he worth it? Yes, he absolutely is. I had a person comment in my shorts about how Zach Bond absolutely is right up there and deserves this kind of contract. I think so. He had a great year last year. He was a key part of the Eagles defense that won the Super Bowl for them last year. However, I want to see it a bit more consistently. I think that Bond is a very good piece to that defense. However, we could easily say the same thing about Bond we said about Purdy earlier. Is he actually a key part of that defense? Is he actually talented enough to be part of that defense? Or is he being carried by other great pieces like Cooper DeJean or Josh Sweat or any of the other great pieces on that Eagles defense that has been instrumental in helping them win a championship in the past year? And we'll have to see. I think if he gets another All Pro, he's definitely going to be up there. I don't know when Bond's up for a contract, but I think that is definitely worth a discussion if he keeps this up. So, with all these Niners getting paid recently, George Kittle getting a recent contract extension, Purdy and Warner, like we just talked about, are the Niners building a dynasty or are they heading for a cap crunch? Because these are huge contracts, right? These contracts are putting huge money into 3 players, 2 on the offense, 1 on the defense, and saying, hey, we trust these guys fully. Is this the start of a championship core, or is this the core that the Niners are going to build around? Well, I think we kind of got our answer in free agency. They let a lot of talent lead. They traded Deebo Samuel to the Commanders. I think this is a very similar pattern that the Chiefs have had the last few years. They traded Tyreek Hill. They traded Joe Tooney this year. They've let pieces go that you wouldn't think they'd let go, but they have. And they've succeeded elsewhere, but the Chiefs have also succeeded as a team. Now, I do think also another interesting correlation between the two is they've paid their star players like Mahomes, Kelsey, and Chris Jones, the heartbeats of their offense and their defense. And now you could easily say the Niners have that core set. Are they able to build around them and compete for a Super Bowl this year? That's a big question. I don't know if you're going to fully know the answer until later in the season. I think you need to have a lot of these questions answered early and quickly because this is a very young Niners team. We have a lot of questions about, like, is Ricky Pearsall going to be okay? Are CMC and other offensive players going to be injured a lot like last year? Trent Williams is another one. Is the defense going to be the same standard like we talked about earlier? Or are they going to be a young squad that needs to have a year and gel before they become a real threat in the NFC? A lot of these questions need to be answered, I think, and they're legitimate questions because you have the Eagles, of course, who are the gold standard of the NFC at this point, in my opinion. However, I do think the Niners have the coaching. They have shown that they can easily, quickly mold players to be really high standard, like Brock Purdy, for example. Now, the question is, can they compete? They have the Rams in their division who upgraded significantly on the offense, and they have the defensive rookie of the year in Jared Verse. You have the Cardinals, who've upgraded on their defense a lot and are a young, exciting core. And if Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. get going on the offense, that could be a very dangerous team. Seattle, of course, is retooled with Sam Darnold at quarterback and some key additions. They also, let Tyler Lockett go. I don't know why. And DK Metcalf. JSN is now the starting number one receiver, I think, in this group. And they drafted Jalen Milroe. So the Seahawks are kind of rebuilding a little bit, but not quite. They're not quite giving up on their potential to be a playoff team yet, but you see the signs. Anyway, the Niners and Rams, I think, are going to be competing for that division. However, I do think if the questions aren't answered quickly for the Niners, they are absolutely going to have some serious doubters come out of the woodworks, and they need to answer these questions quickly because they are a team that has high expectations. A lot of people are pegging them to be at the top of the NFC again. I'd like to see it before I really believe it. It's not like I don't doubt Kyle Shanahan, right? I just would like to see it proven before believing it. And yes, this is a good core to build around of Kittle, Purdy, and Warner, especially Kittle and Warner. I'd love to see Purdy prove himself more. However, that needs to be shown consistently and not just in a super team model that the Niners have had the last few years. If they can show like the Chiefs did back in 2021, 2022, and 2023, that they can retool, be young, and grow from that, then yes, I think this is a great core. This was a great move by the Niners to lock up these three players. So another signing that happened, or extension that happened in the NFL this week as well, Joe Thuney, he was traded to Chicago earlier this offseason by Kansas City to Chicago, and he just got an extension, a 2-year, $35 million extension with 33.5 guaranteed. So now, because he had an extra year left on his contract in Kansas City, it is now a 3-year contract for Thuney to stay in Chicago. And obviously, the Bears are clearly sending a message that they want to protect Caleb Williams at all costs, upgrading that offensive line, giving them the guard that they need. They need another guard probably to step up as well in that offensive line, which is not that great last year. Gave Caleb Williams a lot of issues when he was running for his life a lot last season. And the Bears have shown the last couple of years that they're seriously investing in this window with Caleb Williams to make sure that their franchise quarterback has the weapons, has the opportunity to lead them past mediocrity, past the 4-13 or the 3-14 records that they have had in recent years. Is that going to happen? Who knows? But Joe Thuney is a great investment, considering he was such a great player in Kansas City for the time he was there. He was a great player in New England as well. A solid team leader. He was able to last year go to offensive tackle when the Chiefs needed him. Of course, that was fatally exposed by the Eagles in the Super Bowl. but it showed he's a team player. He's willing to do whatever it takes to help that team win, and I think he will absolutely bring that kind of mindset to Chicago. And you saw when he came to Kansas City how much that culture embraced him. Now, the question is Chicago going to do the same with him? And also, is Tunney old enough that he's going to be able to stay fit and not injured? He had some injury concerns the last couple of years in Kansas City. Now he's 33, and that's just for an offensive lineman that's getting up there. And you have to wonder, is he reaching the last years of his prime, or did Chicago get him after his prime? Because Kansas City traded him for a reason. They like to obviously operate on a Belichick style approach of trade him or let him go before he gets bad. And who knows? Right now, considering what Joe Thuney has been the last few years, I would say this was a great move for Chicago. But if he starts declining, man, this could be such a huge risk for the Bears to invest so much money. 51 million, by the way, in these 3 years that Joe Thuney is getting. That's the most ever for a guard in NFL history, which is crazy to think about. All right, so this week we had the owners meeting in Minneapolis. We had a lot of interesting topics coming into this owners meeting, including flag football being potentially brought up for NFL players to participate in, playoff seeding, and the Tush Push. So let's start with the Lions playoff proposal. So today at the owners meeting, the Lions did withdraw it. However, this playoff proposal was suggesting that the seeding be changed to, instead of the top 4 seeds being given to division winners, instead the seeding is based on record. So, for example, if the Chargers from last year or the Broncos, in this scenario, the Chargers or Broncos would probably have been the 3rd or 4th seed in the playoffs instead of finishing 5th or 6th and barely making or missing the playoffs. It's crazy to think about. You have to wonder why the Lions did this, because this was a team that finished the number 1 seed in their conference last year and were like far head and shoulders considered the best team in the league, and then they fall flat on their face to the Commanders. It's very interesting to see, because why would you want this to go away? Why would you want the division winners to not do that? Because if you take away division winners, then you take away the incentive to win the division, right? It just becomes a t-shirt game at that point. It doesn't matter. The rivalries don't matter. Why do you play 2 games against each divisional opponent every year? Then what's the point if you're not really gunning for a division and you get the incentive of being a top 4 seed? Now, granted, to give some perspective to this argument, we've had division winners, especially I'm thinking NFC South, but we've also had like the 2010 Seahawks, we had the 2014 Panthers getting in that were division winners that had subpar records and didn't look great. The 2014 Panthers were 7-8-1. I think the 2022 Commanders also got in with a 8-9 record or 9-8. It wasn't the best. However, I do think it is good to have some incentive to win your division. Otherwise, why have divisions anymore? Why have any groupings of teams and just make it a full conference where it's just based on rankings like a table for soccer or something like that? To me, that's what you're opening up if you let this proposal go through. According to reports, there were teams that were supportive of this move. However, the NFL decided that they will look at seeding scenarios further for next season. So this is not over by any means, but it is a discussion worth having, because I think it's a Pandora's box. If you open it, the league is going to have to go down a long road of letting other weird ticky tacky adjustments to the seating happen. And I don't know if that's what you want as a league, to change things like that. And I think it's good that it got withdrawn, because it feels dangerous to kind of go down that road. The other huge controversy coming into this was the Tush Push possibly being banned. The Packers, of course, came into this having tweaked the proposal, and they were really hoping to get it done. There was a lot of reports that this had legs, that this was a very real possibility the Tush Push could get banned. However, it did not. It fell 2 votes short. You need a 75% approval rate on a vote to get it passed at the owners' meetings, and that is 24 votes, and the vote was 22-10, in favor of the Tush Push game ban. This is a play that has caused a lot of controversy because people who side with the Packers say it's a player safety issue, that teams defensively can't stop it, and it's hurting their necks and other areas because they're having to push against a lot of weight. George McCaskey of the Bears made an intriguing point about this. If the offense can push, why can't the defense? And that would cause a lot of injuries as well. I think it's good that it didn't get banned because it is a play that just shows the Eagles took a simple little detail in the rule book and ran with it and took a competitive advantage. Now, other teams need to look through the rules and find some way to stop it. And that's part of competing. That's part of being part of a league that has to play against you. You have to find advantages and disadvantages in strategy to the game, and some teams play a little bit more dirty than others, and that's okay. Some say it's a safety issue, some say it isn't. If you can't stop it, scheme for it. Those are the arguments for it. Rich McKay, the competition committee chair, he came out after the vote and said that safety experts in the committee unanimously approved this play and other types of push plays. So this is apparently something that is not like incredibly discouraged by the league. So there's other types of plays apparently that you can push and use that kind of ability with. So I wonder if the league is going to start scheming around the defensive side like we talked about with George McCaskey. Why isn't the defense pushing it on the opposite side? Why are they just standing in a typical defensive formation instead of just lining up their own like tush push on the opposite side of things? Of course, you need like two huge dudes to stop this, like Vita Vea, like two clones of him to be able to stop this probably. And that's not going to happen very often because this is such an OP play, but it's part of the game, part of stepping in between those white lines. You have competitive advantages for some teams, and the other teams had to find the ways to stop it. So for now, the play is still alive. There are reports that it will be brought up again next owners meeting. So we're going to have this discussion again, but still, I think it's good that it didn't because it's just part of the game. Have fun with it and try to be competitive and strategize. One of the cool things that did come out of the owners meetings was the flag football going to the Olympics in 2028 because it's coming to LA here in the summer, and so they're wanting to put flag football in it. And the league has apparently approved by the owners meeting yesterday that NFL players can play in this. Now, it's not completely settled. The NFLPA still has to negotiate and all that stuff. But it looks like this is well on its way to being approved and being seen through. Justin Jefferson yesterday was seen at the owners' meetings, apparently sponsoring this as well because he really wants to be part of it. A lot of receivers apparently are wanting this to happen. And I mean, could you imagine just Mahomes or Chase or Micah Parsons repping Team USA? Flying around those fields, that would be really cool, right? To see it on a global stage, to be able to present the game, even if it's a tamer version of it, on the global stage. However, there are concerns, I think, with this. Training camp is right around the time of the Olympics, so that's a huge issue. You're going to miss training camp if you participate in it. However, I have seen people say that this could be just mostly players that aren't really well known, and a few stars are probably going to be there for marketing probably purposes. So that's a very interesting take on it, and I can see that. It does bring injury risks, I think, as well, though it won't be as serious as you have with like tackle football, obviously, because you're not trying to drag a human to the ground. But still, it's a very cool thing that this is going global. And it goes back to what we talked about in the last episode with the international franchises, international Super Bowl. It's another way to expose people and say, oh, look, this looks really cool. Why not get into it? And I think that's awesome. I think we want to grow the game as much as possible because we want others to see it and we want others to enjoy it. I know I love that at least. And will others always appreciate it? No, there's some rules that feel really strange and weird about the game, but still, if someone else decides they want to watch it because of the Olympics, hey, that's pretty cool. And we love to have more fans of this league because it is so cool. We love the experience, we love the fandoms, all of that. So it going to the Olympics is just another step, I think, towards international franchises, international Super Bowls, more international games probably. So I think we are seeing this starting to ramp up a bit, and it'll be very interesting to see who participates, who is not participating who says there are concerns coming into this. I'm very fascinated. In the comments, drop your ideal flag football lineup for this. Who do you want to see rep Team USA? I think that would be very fascinating to see your comments and see who you would like to play on both sides of the ball. Other notes from the owners' meetings, we apparently had Jerry Jones speaking up. He said that there was no discussion yet on an 18-game schedule or Roger Goodell's extension. To me, that's very interesting that Jerry Jones is the one bringing this up, considering he has such a beef. If you don't know, Jerry Jones is the owner of the Dallas Cowboys. He, for a while now, has wanted to become NFL commissioner and has been very critical of Roger Goodell's salary, that it's not performance based and instead it's very much just a number given to him instead by the owners. He's been very critical of that, of course, Roger Goodell's approach to disciplining players as well. So, yeah, I feel like this is just very interesting that Jones is the one coming out with these comments on the schedule and Goodell's contract, which is up for renewal pretty soon, I believe. So, very, I kind of find that hilarious because Jones is such a wild goose egg of a case that he could just explode chaos on this all of a sudden. And of course, I think he thinks part of this is because he's a huge brand with the Cowboys, and of course, the Cowboys are everything to him, and he wants more exposure for his team and all of that. But still, I I love that he's trying to implement a little chaos into the owners' meetings. A new award is coming out as well. The Protector of the Year is becoming a new award, and it's going to be awarded to the best offensive lineman in the league. I love this so much. This is about time to recognize the guys in the trenches that have never got enough recognition, and now they are going to. Is it a prestigious award like the Walter Payton? No, but it's still really cool that we are giving recognition finally to some of the guys that help keep the quarterbacks alive in the backfield. And I'm sure that's probably why Jason Kelsey was spotted at owners' meetings today, because this was being brought up, I'm sure, as well as the Tush Push, which he founded in Philly. But I would assume that this is also partly it because he's become the gold standard of what an offensive lineman is in recent years, considering he's popular not just because he was as a player, but because of the podcast he hosts with his brother Travis, who is a tight end for the Chiefs. So yeah, I think this is really cool, and I cannot wait to see who wins it. Who do you think wins the first Protector of the Year award? I'd be very curious. I could see the likes of Lane Johnson, maybe Joe Thuney if he does really well in Chicago this year. I could see a lot of good candidates for this. Creed Humphrey maybe for the Chiefs if he keeps up his impressive stats of almost allowing no sacks as a center, which is pretty impressive as well. So drop your comments and tell us who you think is going to be the Protector of the Year in its first inaugural season. Also, we got Hard Knocks announced. If you're a fan of the show, you know that it's in the off season. Of course, recently they're doing the in season Hard Knocks. So this year, the off season one for training camp is the Buffalo Bills. It's going to start in July, I believe, on HBO. That's a very interesting one. You're gonna have a high profile team that is a Super Bowl contender on that show, so that's pretty cool. Usually in years past it was for like bad teams that were trying to build, and now it's kind of just been random teams or trendy teams as of late going on the show. And then in the in season version, which is my personal favorite, I love those kinds of shows. It's going to be the NFC East, and I think that's really going to be fascinating. Of course, you have the Eagles, who are defending Super Bowl champs. You have the Commanders, who made a run to the NFC Championship game and are a team on the rise and look like they have a lot of good talent on that roster. Then, of course, you have the big brand there, the Dallas Cowboys, who are the agents of chaos in that division. And then the Giants, who are not great, but they're still a team that is fascinating to watch just because they could always be in the top five, and they have Jackson Dart now. They have some young talent like Abdul Carter as well. I think it's a great division to pick. They had the AFC North last year for the in-season version, so I'm very fascinated to see how this one goes. I love these kinds of documentaries. The in-season ones, to me, it just gives so much insight into the ongoings of a team in everyday life. So I appreciate those. Drop below also what you think of the hit the Hard Knocks this year. Who do you think is going to be a standout? Do you think there's going to be one team in particular this year that could be a really fun watch on the in-season version? Let us know in the comments. And with that, let's head pitch side because we've got a lot to talk about there as well, including Cardiff City. According to reports, they have narrowed down their list to a couple of managers, including Des Buckingham and Ian Evatt. Buckingham being the former Oxford United manager. He got them to the championship a couple of years ago through the playoffs, and Ian Evatt was a former Bolton Wanderers manager. He got sacked earlier this season. He is an expert in League One and has helped the Wanderers get to the playoffs a few times in the last few years. Now, I do think Buckingham is the right fit for Cardiff just because he knows how to get a team up from League One. Like I said, he got the U's up through the playoffs a couple of years ago, and now they're in the championship. He didn't quite finish the job there at Oxford United, but he was able to at least start it, and even though he got sacked, the U's are still in the championship. So obviously, he built something right there at Oxford. It just wasn't to be under his leadership, apparently. So, if there's a manager, I think you want Des Buckingham of the two candidates because he just has that pedigree. Now, could you say that's luck because playoffs are such a lottery? You could definitely say that as well. However, I just don't see it with Ian Evatt just because the Bolton Wanderers have not really gone above playoffs contending much lately. So, and this year they weren't that great. So I would say Buckingham feels like the better choice. Is Cardiff going to be coming back up at the first time asking? I don't think so. I think you have better teams like Plymouth and Luton that are going to probably be at the top. But I think if Cardiff plays their cards right and they get the right manager, they could be there. It just doesn't feel like they'll be one of the autos right away, unless they make some serious moves in the summer transfer window as well. Another interesting bit of news was Middlesbrough's come out saying they submitted their formal request to change their badge for the upcoming season, as is their 150th season. They did a lot of fan surveys, a lot of fan work at meetings over the season as well, and according to those results, 57% of the fans favor a circular badge with the rampant lion, which is a very iconic look for Middlesbrough, and it goes back to the tradition that has been for that club. And the circular badge goes back to the badge that is previous, the current one. In my opinion, I do like the current Middlesbrough badge. It's very unique. You don't see a lot of shield badges like it. It has the shield with the rampant lion and the ribbons. Very old school classic English badge, I think, and you don't see many like it nowadays in football. It's more circle badges these days. So I think this kind of goes back to what I would say is more cliche type badge. However, most people are kind of favoring the tradition, and I guess I can see it. As long as they keep some of the traditional elements, I guess I could see it. I just favor the current one personally. I don't think it needs to change much. Just maybe some tweaks to show you that it's 150 years, but that would just be me. They are changing their kit man suppliers this year, so this could be a very drastic change for the club in terms of branding, in terms of how their kits look and how the badge looks. And they have even hinted that if this badge and the kit does well, that this could be a permanent change for the club. So I would be very fascinated to see how that goes in the upcoming season. So that's something to keep an eye on. Just if you're a fan of like badges and kits and all that, that's a really cool, interesting update to that. So let's head to the playoff final because this is the ultimate game of the year in the championship, the last one before off-season officially hits, and that is Sheffield United and Sunderland, the 3 and the 4 seeds clashing. Of course, Sheffield United blasted Bristol City, and Sunderland barely squeaked by Coventry City with the last-minute winner by Dan Ballard. It's a huge one. Sheffield United are the clear favorites to most people. Sunderland can't be counted out. However, if Sunderland won a shot, they definitely need to play better than they did in the second leg against Coventry City because that was rough to watch. Because for most of that game, Coventry City dominated the possession, they dominated the shots, they had better chances. And it just happened to be that Sunderland was able to, in extra time, find that extra gear that Coventry City weren't able to and somehow score the winner. So it feels like fine margins for Sunderland. They do have Dan Ballard, who was the MVP of that last tie. He heads everything. However, Sheffield United have so many tall pieces like Kiefer Moore, Tyrese Campbell, and they have a supplier to Gustavo Hammer who can get them deadly accurate balls into the box, and that feels like a huge factor in this game. Set pieces, free kicks, corners. If Sheffield United can take advantage of those, I think that will be key. If they can, Sunderland have a huge chance in this game. They have so much talent on the attacking side. Lefay, they have Enda, they have Isidore, they have Roberts. I'm not a huge fan of Roberts, but he's definitely talented. You can't count him out. I also really like Shirkin as well. And Rig as well, when he comes on, is decent for them. It's going to be a huge chess match between Labrie and Wilder as well, the managers for both clubs. Both are very skilled at talent, at tactics, and shifting their formations and all that. I'm curious to see what formation Sunderland lines up in. The first leg, they lined up in a 4-4-2, I believe it was. And then for the second leg, they went 4-2-3-1, I believe. So it was a very interesting shift in tactics, and I kind of wonder if the 4-4-2 suits a more counterattack style that Sunderland might have to approach this game with, because they are playing against what I think is a slightly superior side in Sheffield United. If they can go with a counterattack style, and they showed they can do this against Coventry City, then they might have a chance because they have some good passers out there. And Isidore on the break is deadly. And Mayenda as well. And they just have some good players that can easily spring a counterattack on you and you aren't expecting it. Joe Bellingham, of course, is there on Sunderland as well. He's going to be a huge name that is talked about as well because he's going to be leaving after this, it looks like. So this could be his final game in a Sunderland shirt. Who knows? It's just very delicately poised. If I did have to pick, though, I would say Sheffield United are the favorites. I do like that they have the advantage on the set pieces, that they can dictate the midfield. They have a very physical midfield, Sheffield United do. And here are some Burrows as well, and that wing is just a very deadly passer. And he can score penalties too, like we saw against Bristol City. So I would say that Gustavo Hammer serves into the box is the key for this game, and that Sheffield United are going to win 2-1, and that they will bag promotion to the Premier League and all the riches with promotion, and that Sunderland just falls short. If that did happen, that means we lose the Steel City Derby, which is very unfortunate because it was really cool to have that. Both games were pretty intense, so it's going to be a loss for sure to have that kind of derby gone from the championship. If Sunderland were to go up, you'd miss the weird Tees Derby as well. So you're going to miss one rivalry or another, but Steel City feels like the bigger one of the two. And yeah, that's very unfortunate, but that's just part of being in the championship. You're going to lose some teams and some rivalries as a result. But Sheffield United or Sunderland, either one would fully deserve it. They're the 3 and the 4 seeds for a reason, the top 2 seeds in the playoffs. Also, a very interesting note that I saw, the 6th seed has not made a playoff final in a long time, and I guess the question is, are we starting to get a little repetitive with our playoff seedings or playoff finals? Is the 3 and the 4 seed just an overpowered one at this rate? I wouldn't say that necessarily. I just think the second legs of the ties being at home for those higher seeds is huge because you get to go on the road, and if you can snatch one on the road against the lower seeds, then you have a huge advantage going into the second leg. And you have a lot of options going into that home leg. So I wouldn't say it's an overpowered thing to be 3 or 4. This year, it kind of was because the 3, the 4 seeds were just legs, heads, and shoulders better than the 5th and 6th seeds, though. We saw Sunderland struggle with Coventry City, but I feel like overall Sunderland have just been a better team in general this year than Coventry City. So I feel like Sheffield United and Sunderland definitely deserved to be in this position. It wasn't a fluke by any means, and I'm really excited to watch this, even if it's the final game for the last 3 months and we're not going to have any more championship football for a while. So I'm going to soak this in, and hopefully you will enjoy it as well, because hopefully it's a really good game of football. And that's all we want as fans, don't we? Just some good footy on a Saturday. And with that, that's it for this episode of the Pitch Grid. Thanks so much for joining us. If you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss an upload. Listening on Spotify or Apple, a rating or a follow goes a very long way. We will be back soon with more chaos, commentary, and coverage from both sides of the pond football. And until next time, stay sharp, y'all.